comfy chairs.
You know, we had to. Okay, I think we're ready to begin. Because of the live stream, we have to start on time. Did you have a good birthday, Cooper? Okay, good. Yeah. I knew you were concerned about that.
Satisfied.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Well, last night was pretty spectacular. Walter Kern was amazing. So we've got a fabulous show for you today. We begin with a topic on which I feel very comfortable, namely economics and economics and finance. As you can tell from the look here, right? We've got the whole Gordon Gekko look going. All right. So the economics piece of this has been a part of the story from the very beginning. The Federal Reserve slammed the interest rate. You know, let me put it this way. Jerome Powell had been trying to resolve the balance sheet problems in the Fed that had been accumulated since 2008 and had been gradually raising interest rates. And then something happened, and I think it was about March 11th or March 12th. He panicked in the other direction, going against his instincts, and we went back to zero interest rate policies. And then he printed over the next, 18 months, 24 months, I don't know how much, $8 trillion or something. But unlike in 2008, where the quantitative easing ended up back in the bank vaults, this money went out hot on the streets and landed as stimulus payments, and the American people were encouraged to spend them, especially at favored companies such as online retailers and big box grocery stores. This actually happened to us. It's unbelievable. And with the resulting inflation where we lost something like, 30% of the value of the dollar over 4 years, wiping out all the fake riches that the American people thought they had during the pandemic period. So, and now we're left with a Fed balance sheet that's kind of worse than ever, and a Fed lowering interest rates again in the midst of a time where there's a great push for a digital, centralized digital currency. And now we've got the Trump administration rallying around crypto technology in ways that are sort of, on one hand, a relief, on the other hand, introduce other problems about which we'll speak today. So we have with us Aaron Day, who runs his own nonprofit and is a great expert in crypto, the crypto industry, and also has been sounding the alarm about the growing problem of technocracy, which he argues is getting worse rather than better under the present administration. And then we also have Bret Swanson, who was formerly of the American Enterprise Institute, and but is no longer there because they have some benefactors that start with the letter P and the second letter Z or whatever F. Yeah. So they're not fans of Bret. Bret's been sounding the alarms on many aspects of the pandemic response. And then finally, very honored to have Ed Dowd, who you probably know from his many appearances on online and with Steve Bannon's War Room and many other places. And he had the perspicacity to look at life insurance data to observe that the shots weren't entirely working out as expected. But he is an economist by training. In fact, all these gentlemen here are economists by training. They played a very important role over the last 4 years because, as I say, the economic and financial piece of this turns out to be very important and highly technical. So I just want to start with Ed and address the problem of what I thought was a relatively hot CPI report that came in the other day. And for all the world, I'm seeing what looks to me like the emergence of a second wave and a Fed that's now lowering rates. And you probably read David Stockman's article on Brownstone yesterday. He bumped into Jerome Powell at a cocktail party in Manhattan. This is the way things happen in the real world. And told him he was out of his mind to be lowering rates right now. And that he's making everything worse rather than better. So, Ed, I'm just going to open it up to you and let you comment on this.
Yeah, we've been tracking the economy since the beginning of COVID. I work with a partner, Carlos Alegria, who wrote a book, Economic Cycles, Debt, and Demographics. And we were calling for a recession at the end of 23-24. That did not occur. Our economic cycle indicators had indicated we were going to enter one, and miraculously we didn't. And then we asked ourselves, have the laws of economic fundamentals changed? The answer was no. We figured out that the Biden administration basically opened the floodgates and let in 20 million illegal immigrants and then funded them through NGOs and government agencies to the tune of anywhere from $500 billion to $1.5 trillion. We were running 8% deficits, which are crisis level deficits. and that floated the economy for a year or two longer. The AI bubble also emerged. So those two things have really been holding up the economy. Trump's policies are pro-AI, anti-immigration. And so we predicted in January of this year that we'd be looking at a deep worldwide recession in 25. Looks like it's going to probably hit in the beginning of 26. But the bottom line is this, the stopping of the illegal immigrant flow and the cutting off of those dollars is going to reverse the juice that came in. And we're starting to see that in the economy. The real economy is dreadful for the average person. And one of the big themes from this conference that is emerging is narrative and storytelling. And if you listen to the Trump administration, the stock market's hitting new all-time highs, everything's great, and their policies are working. Their policies are not working because they take time to be implemented. These tariffs and bringing all this investment back has not happened yet, and it's going to take time. So there's a big valley in between. And we're starting to see the emergence of credit problems. And, typically speaking, inflation is a credit phenomenon, and we've for the last 2 years, there's been a massive misallocation of capital and a lot of fraud. And the first cracks are showing up in the subprime auto sector. We've had the bankruptcy of Tricolor Auto, which catered to illegal immigrants, Primalend, which catered to illegal immigrants, and First Brands, which is an aftermarkets auto dealer. There's going to be liquidity crises coming, in our humble opinion. The stock market will eventually figure this out. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of financial turmoil going into the first half of 26, right in time for the midterms. So inflation number came out. It looked a little hot, but underneath the surface, we've been tracking inflation and the trend. The trend is down in one of the biggest components of the CPI, which is shelter. Shelter's 36%. And what was holding up the housing market were the illegal immigrants through rents, and they're all going the wrong way. New tenant rents started collapsing in the fourth quarter of last year. They continue to collapse. The housing market is going to go into a recession, and that's 20% of our economy. So the credit part of the cycle is beginning. We had in 2023 some bank issues with Silicon Valley Bank, and the Fed stopped that. That could have been a bank run. The Fed basically lent money to these banks who were upside down on a duration trade. Basically, their assets had been all invested for 14 years at very low yield, zero interest rate environment. They were caught off sides. The Fed is not going to plug credit holes, and that's the part of the cycle we're in now, where losses are coming. And there's so much fraud out there. This is the golden age of fraud. We're now finding out that a lot of these companies basically were double booking and selling receivables. There's so much fraud, and it's just beginning to be peeled back. And I don't think the Trump administration can do anything to stop what's coming because it's endogenous to the economy. His tariff talk is exogenous, meaning he can control the dial on that. He can give it and take it away. That's coming to an end. And the AI bubble is the most massive bubble I've ever seen. If you look at the stock market since the end of last year to today, the equal-weighted S&P has gone nowhere. So it's been 7 stocks. And if you look at the thematic, theme of AI and the valuations of those stocks, it's basically discounting our digital prison system that's coming.
What?
The market's discounting our digital prison system that's coming. So all the value is accrued to the companies that are creating the digital prison.
Do you have any comments about the commercial real estate? Well, I was going to say crisis, but issue in the big cities, and we thought.
Yeah, so that's been ongoing, and it's been hidden. The New York Federal Reserve in November of last year put out a report indicating that banks are extending and pretending, and they're very worried about that, and that's all going to come to a head. So that's an issue that should have come to light in the last couple of years. It hasn't. So as the credit issues start everywhere else, it's just going to cascade.
Yeah. And specifically on the CPI, I saw there were other hot elements besides there was groceries, and then also and beef prices, right? But then also healthcare is is one of the hottest parts of CPI right now.
Healthcare is a disaster. Unfortunately, our work from the COVID vaccine indicates that disabilities and injuries are going to continue for a while, and that we're all going to pay more because the insurance companies aren't going to take the loss.
Yeah.
So they're raising prices, and it's going to get to the point where people have to make choices, and a lot of families are going to go without health care.
Yeah, which might be wise, actually. Yeah. Go ahead, Bret.
Well, just on the healthcare point, I think you're referring to a new Kaiser Permanente or Kaiser Family Foundation.
Yes, but our good
report.
friends.
That's right. And they've been tracking this for a long time. They've been putting out good data showing that family health insurance premiums now are averaging $27,000 per year.
Yeah.
Some of you may have seen a tweet from a father with 3 young kids saying, if you include the deductibles, right, for the family of 5, he's paying $50,000 a year before insurance pays $1.
And that's not even getting anything, right?
Right.
Because if you use it, then you still
And he
have to
says
pay.
we don't use hardly any of it.
Yeah.
He's like,
If you do use it, then you're going to pay even more.
he said, am I wrong to think that I just should drop my policy? That feels bad as a father. But that's just one facet of this, sort of dual economy where we've got all this tech, right, which is producing lots of what you might call deflation, but in the big parts of the economy where you have to support a family, healthcare, education, housing, et cetera, we've had, really strong inflation for a while now. If I could just maybe step back a bit, and that was a terrific summary by Ed on what's happening right now. I think we're sort of in the midst of 3 pretty big economic transformations compared to what we've been living with for the last, say, even 50 years. One, AI, despite the fact that it probably is a bubble in many senses, is a new computing paradigm. If you think about how big AI is right now, and again, there might be lots of overinvestment, consider that in the 30 years between 1995 and 2025, the years when we built out the internet, right? So this was laying all the fiber optic cables. This was building broadband to homes and offices.
Cell towers.
This was cell towers.
Except in Vermont.
Exactly.
It's there.
And the first generation of data centers where we would store our data and you'd get your Netflix streams served from. Over that 30 years, we invested in the U.S. about $3 trillion, which was, one of the biggest tech investment story of all time. It was an amazing accomplishment. And today, even though there was a bubble and bust in 2000, 2001, today it's the foundation of much of our economy, right? AI is going to dwarf that by an order of magnitude. So this year alone, the hyperscalers, OpenAI, Facebook, Google, Elon Musk's XAI, are going to invest about $400 billion in AI data centers this year. And projections are that by 2029, in 1 year alone, they might invest $1 trillion, right? Now, Ed and I were talking about this a little bit last night. Is this a bubble? Will this be way too much investment compared to the revenue that they will garner? Very possible. But right now, the AI build-out is accounting for about half of all economic growth in just these couple companies. And I think...
economic growth, we leverage anyway.
Yeah. Just quickly, and then I'll let Aaron jump in. The 2 other sort of what I think big transformations, Ed talked about this, is really a new spending and monetary regime. We hadn't had any measured inflation for about 40 years until the last 4 years.
Yeah.
We're on a spending path, even with Trump's attempts to sort of cut back and Doge and all of this, to have continuing annual deficits of 1.8 trillion. I've never been a particular deficit hawk, but this is unsustainable.
Yeah.
We're moving towards more of a European style like economy where it's going to be even harder to reform once you get to 50% of the economy being consumed by government. The third, I think, big transformation is what you might call deglobalization. You might say it's an attempt to rebuild American manufacturing, American production. And you could say that, the optimistic case is that in 5 or 10 years, we will have built out a new advanced manufacturing economy with robots and, and all sorts of things that we need to produce, advanced chips and advanced transportation and so forth. In the meantime, right, even, I talked to businessmen, even those who are fans of the current administration are saying that the tariffs are causing all sorts of dislocations in their businesses, dislocating production schedules, causing uncertainty in pricing. So even if your optimistic case over the next, 5 or 10 years happens and we reshore a lot of production, along the way, I think there are going to be lots of dislocations, which combined with the spending and the inflation and the credit issues, probably are going to cause some turmoil.
It's all very alarming to me because of the political implications too, right? I mean, let's face it, we have everybody has a stake in the success, and to some extent, of the Trump administration, even if you're not a fan, because the alternative is, we know, right?
Right.
So this is very worrisome if this gets out of hand and, we find ourselves in an inflationary recession next year in a technical recession in industry, and the Trump administration is punished for it politically. That could be the end. Let's move over to the monetary side, if I may.
Well, if I might jump in on that. I mean, I don't know if it could be much worse than it is under Trump right now from the perspective of how technocracy is flourishing. I mean, if you look at what's gone on, we now have Real ID, which is a digital ID in 11 states, with 20 more states rolling it out. We have a backdoor CBDC through the Genius Act. So what they've done is they've given Congress power over stable coins, which are very popular, $27 trillion a year used in these stable coins, and now the Congress, which is the entity that's responsible for financial surveillance, is overseeing that along with the Federal Reserve. But then from a technocracy perspective, I suspect they're trying to engineer the demolition of the economy, because it's the combination of AI surveillance plus implementing all these other digital systems, which is the gateway for UBI and pushing technocracy further. So yes, there's going to be a collapse because we have all of these asset bubbles. And what's the solution that's going to be offered? UBI through all of these efficiency improvements that have happened through AI. And by the way, one issue that I have is you can either have MAHA or you can have medical freedom, but you can't have both. If you actually look at what's going on with Palantir Health and Operation Stargate, they are collecting more data on us now than at any point in time. And this data is being used and will be used to determine if we get access to medical care or not. There's going to be a complete scoring system. AI is already heavily used with insurance companies. So we talked about United Healthcare and Luigi, but there's a lawsuit now against United Healthcare where apparently they are rejecting 90% of their Medicare Advantage claims using AI. Now, if you have a dispute and you want to appeal, you appeal to the AI. Well, here's the bad news. Medicare and Medicaid are going to start implementing AI next year. So DOGE was never about saving money. DOGE was about getting access to Palantir of all of our other information. So they're now marrying our health information, DHS information, and all of this information into one system, which is going to be weaponized against us. But it's happening right now, not under a current administration, but as we are sitting here today.
Can you back up slightly on this stablecoin point? Because I try to follow your writings. I'm not so much involved in the crypto world as I once was, but there was a time when the stablecoin seemed like the great alternative to FedWire. And it looked to me like under the Biden administration they were attacking all the stablecoins, trying to shut them down to monopolize money transfers under the Federal Reserve. And that seems to have reversed itself under the current administration. And I would have thought that that was a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded good at the time because, I mean, I've spent 3 years opposing CBDCs, and everybody's like, oh, you must be thrilled that Trump's against CBDCs. The problem is that if you tried to roll out a CBDC, a digital currency issued by the Federal Reserve, you'd get resistance to it. And what is it that people are concerned about? They're concerned about money that can be programmed, tracked, and censored. So what did they come up with? They came up with a way to take stable coins, which are privately issued by companies like Tether and USDC, and put it under regulatory control of the Congress and the Federal Reserve. Well, these are programmable digital tokens. And so now at this point, at any point in time, if there's an emergency, Congress could say, hey, if you're a stablecoin issuer, you need to make it so that your money can only be used to buy certain things. Where you can whitelist transactions, blacklist transactions. And so this idea of, well, we have 5 or 10 or 20 issuers of stablecoins versus the central bank doesn't really matter in the age of AI surveillance and tracking.
This gets to a big issue we've seen over the last, 5+ years is, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday, was the government outsourcing its enforcement or surveillance functions to private entities, whether companies or NGOs, et cetera. And this is a real worry. I don't know if any of you have noticed, I've been getting all sorts of questionnaires from my just regular banks, right, demanding more and more and more information for just simple transactions or just updating their systems, right? And I've noticed a real uptick in that lately. And so that's just through the regular banking system. And so I think one lesson we've learned, whether it was the way that the government either cooperated with or coerced the, big tech social media companies to censor us during COVID. Now what they're doing potentially through some of the crypto, right? We need to think about new ways to really reclaim sort of our individual freedoms and rights from this new system that they're developing that's much more difficult to oppose through the front door.
Just to back up on the bank point. Again, Aaron, I love your attitudes on this, but seems like one of the good things the Trump administration has done is stop some of this bank cancellations. I mean, over the previous administration, people are losing their bank accounts.
Everybody should voluntarily get out of their bank account. That's my opinion.
Well, that's a big ask, though. I'm just saying, don't you think it's a good thing that the Trump administration sort of dialed back some of this debanking stuff?
Well, again, I don't think people should be using banks. So now we're pushing people into a system where they're heavily surveilled under the existing banking system, right? You're already tracked. There's already transaction reports that go to the Treasury. The money's already digital. And now they're going to add bank-issued stablecoins. So the fact that, so I actually, coming at it from the crypto side, I'm like, why are crypto people cheering being banked?
Right.
The whole point of this movement was to work outside of the banks.
Yeah, that was the whole point of the movement.
So I'm not sure that moves freedom forward, but it's certainly a good talking point.
Yeah, I see the point.
I agree with Aaron.
Yeah.
Stablecoins are backdoor CBDC.
You agree with that?
Yeah, I have.
Are you surprised by that?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, JP Morgan will have a stable coin, and whatever administration gets in there, they can then lean on JP Morgan.
And that also increases the demand for treasuries, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Because that's where they're all invested. Am I right? 100%.
Yeah, so this is how we're going to fund the debt, right? You're right. We have $1.8 trillion deficits. How are we going to fund it? Well, Bazant and the rest of the guys are like, hey, these stable coins are popular. Let's force the issuers to back them by treasuries. And now there's $2 trillion.
Yeah.
What an amazing thing. Just real quickly before I forget, I get notifications all the time that my bank has new information on my credit score. Now, I don't really actually care about my credit score because I'm not applying for a mortgage. So am I right to think that this sort of endless push to gamify your credit score is just acculturating us to a social credit system?
Well, absolutely. And when you dig into Operation Stargate and you dig into what's going on with Palantir, they are absolutely...
Explain what Stargate is real quickly. Nobody knows about this stuff.
So this was one of the first things Trump announced. It was a $500 billion deal with Oracle, Larry Ellison, OpenAI, and Palantir. And it's basically under the guise of kind of national defense. We're going to build this incredible AI infrastructure where we're going to aggregate all of the data and we're going to use it to improve our healthcare system and improve our national security, so on and so forth. But they've already broken ground. They're already working actively on aggregating this information. And I didn't track Larry Ellison as much over the years, but certainly have in the last 3 or 4 months. He's come out of nowhere, and now he's buying media companies, TikTok, and he's heavily involved in this whole AI movement. And he believes that we should be surveilled. He is a vocal public proponent of surveillance capitalism.
Now, I may be getting my names confused. Elon's own sort of national security surveillance company is called what?
Elon, well, there's, which one? There's X, there's...
Well, I mean...
SpaceX,
there's
Tesla.
There's
the
Palantir,
Starlink, but then there's the classified stuff.
I don't know, Palantir is Peter Thiel.
Yeah.
And then the consortium of Elon's companies work with the government in
SpaceX
various
is
ways.
the national security.
No. Well, yeah, but doesn't he have a contract with the NSA or the CIA or something like that to build surveillance? It's like
That's news to me.
Yeah, that's news to me. I think that's Palantir.
It's not
predominantly.
Starlink. It's well, okay, yeah, I don't know. What do you make of the dispute between OpenAI and XAI? I mean, Elon and this other guy hate each other's guts. Isn't that good?
Well, I mean, the one, so I'm actually not negative in the sense that we should be looking at how to use AI to boost our consciousness, and to actually boost our individual thinking. And actually, I might bring down my computer. I actually have one of these NVIDIA supercomputers and everything else. I mean, you can actually train it on your own data, so you're not subject to, I have all the Brownstone articles.
Oh.
Downloaded on my computer. I have all of Patrick Wood's 7,000 articles on technocracy. So you can use AI where you control what you put in it, and then you actually control how it outputs the information to you. This can actually be a very helpful tool. Now, if you're counting on what Anthropic or OpenAI or Grok are going to tell you, then yeah, you're right. You're going to end up like the TV and not the remote control. The division is good, though, but you have to understand how Silicon Valley works. And this is why, are a lot of people going to lose money in AI? Yes. But if you look at the dot-com bubble, there was an incredible amount of wealth created, $5 trillion plus for the main companies. And the way Silicon Valley works is they take an all-or-nothing approach. Peter Thiel even wrote a book, 0 to 1. This is why Mark Zuckerberg is paying $1.5 billion to hire a single developer, because they know in a winner-take-all game, whoever wins is going to end up having a $400 trillion company 10 years from now. So it's great that there's the division to the extent that we take the technology that they're creating and build decentralized versions of it that can empower our own lives. That's the useful part about all of the fighting that's going on. But we don't want to be pulled into any one of the winners that in this situation, or any of the people playing in the winner-take-all game. That is the digital prison.
Yeah.
I agree with all of that. There's going to be tremendous carnage because you've got 7 companies investing just unbelievable amounts of capital, and not all of them are going to succeed equally. So there's going to be lots of carnage. On the other hand, 10, 20 years from now, AI is going to create unprecedented wealth, and the key is to be able to use it, leverage it as individuals, as decentralized communities, so that they don't control. Back on just quickly on the Elon Musk, Sam Altman point.
Yeah.
In about 2015, Elon Musk gave $50 million to start OpenAI, which was a nonprofit which was supposed to do AI safety research.
Right.
Along the way, Sam Altman sort of converted it into a for-profit, and now it's this giant company. And
it's about to go public, too.
Yes, and so Elon Musk and Sam Altman have sort of a blood feud, and I think Elon's still suing OpenAI.
Yeah, but one thing that's important about that is Elon is not a white knight. We really need to get rid of this whole idea. He went out and everybody took this approach of, he's trying to save AI by keeping it open. If you look at the legal discovery with OpenAI, it turns out he was actually not objecting to the fact that OpenAI was trying to go for profit, but he wanted to actually buy it for Tesla. He wanted to bring OpenAI into Tesla for his own purposes. So there's not a noble philanthropic mission with respect to this. But yes, they are battling it out, and certainly there are others. We also have to be aware of the fact that China is leading in 57 out of 64 technology categories, and they're very close to catching up on AI. So we get so focused on what's going on here, we don't even realize we're getting destroyed in robotics, we're getting destroyed in quantum computing, and even a whole other list of technological areas.
Yeah. Oh, listen, I wanted to ask very quickly, to get back to this sort of mundane. All these companies, Amazon, UPS, whatever, they're slicing off all their top layers of management, firing, I don't know, tens, hundreds of thousands of people, under the with the advertisement that, well, AI is replacing all these management layers. And it occurred to me that these management layers were in all major corporations were wildly overblown anyway, and needed to be purged. I mean, look what Elon did to Twitter when he took over. He ended up firing 4 out of 5 people, and it worked better than ever. And so even without AI, this seems to me this needed to happen in any case.
I think, I've written a lot about productivity growth and sort of optimistically about how AI and other technologies can sort of revolutionize sectors of the economy that have been holding productivity and thus income growth back, primarily healthcare and education, which haven't exhibited any productivity growth in 40 years, right? And so one big question for me, if you just look at it from a purely economic perspective, is are we going to allow healthcare, education, and some other over-bureaucratized, heavily regulated industries to use technology to make things more efficient, more cost-efficient, less expensive for consumers, or are they so regulated that, and that will necessarily, come at the expense of lots of jobs, right? A lot of them may be make-work jobs, a lot of them may be compliance jobs, which we don't want, but add cost. And so you can worry about the AI implications for privacy, and is the AI going to be making your insurance decision? Sort of from an economic perspective, I'm wondering whether we are actually going to allow these heavily regulated industries to be revolutionized, which I think we desperately need.
Yeah, certainly with healthcare and education.
Yeah.
I think on the recent layoffs, it's a lot of storytelling going on.
Yep.
AI is not really responsible for these layoffs. If you look at the cash flow on Amazon's most recent quarter, their cash flow is going the wrong way. And I was talking to a former Google employee, and AI spending is crowding out everything, all of the projects and people.
I see.
So these layoffs are to
make room for the more investment in AI.
Yeah, and that's not human.
That's different from robots who replace
That's
people.
different than AI is being used to get rid of that person.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, that makes perfect sense, right? You can't spend on everything. Yeah, so we're just being pressured. Any comments on that, Aaron?
Well, I mean, but certainly AI is replacing people in a major way. I mean, there are factories in China that are completely and totally robotic at this point in time. So that is absolutely coming. But there are some people. I mean, Warner might even talk about it when he's up here, about how he's applied AI for legal purposes and legal practice to just absolutely scale things up. We shouldn't be afraid of it. Again, we should be trying to figure out, rather than saying, well, this is this bad thing and I don't want it to happen and I hope it goes away. That's
my view.
We should be figuring out. So one thing that's happened is, Mike Adams, Health Ranger, has released in AI. It was originally called Enoch. Now it's called Bright U. And he spent $2 million of his own money training this on alternative health information. And he gave it away for free. You can download this on your computer and not even have to be connected to the internet. And now you can actually access all this health information. That is a good use. It's rare, but it's a good use of AI. And there are more applications like that we should be trying to embrace. So again, I do think that it's possible that we can focus on cognitive liberty and emotional sovereignty and actional independence and use AI to do all of that. But most of the time we're spending is focusing on fearing, which we should, the technocracy aspect of it.
Yeah. So, Aaron, aside from your recommendation that everybody bail from banks, I have recently become a little bit of fatalistic concerning the advance of what you call technocracy. It seems like we don't have any way out. What's your sense?
I think we absolutely do have a way out. Because as I was discussing, you can use these AIs and you can take the technology and the carnage from this battlefield. And I mean, this is what I'm doing. I mean, I'm downloading all these AIs, and now I have on my own computer. We talk about in crypto, not your keys, not your coins. So you don't want to leave your crypto on an exchange, or somebody might be able to take it. I actually take that approach now with AI.
Right.
So build your own AI, build your own library for AI, start training it.
Okay.
But there are other things that we can do. So I focus not only on exiting the monetary system, but exiting the healthcare system. One of the things that we're launching is a medical tourism marketplace.
Right.
That we built. This is a fact. The more you study how healthcare actually works, you realize we're completely being ripped off. And it's a systemic problem. It's not even just a COVID thing or a recent thing or it's structurally broken. Medical tourism is now a $100 billion a year industry, growing at 25% per year. You can save 80% on medical procedures with higher healthcare outcomes. Because in a lot of cases, these are doctors that are trained here that are like, hey, I realize the system, I don't have any choice. I don't get to make any decisions on the care that I'm delivering, so I'm going to go somewhere where it's not regulated like this. So Thailand has become the major center for this. But this isn't just cosmetic surgery. We're talking about there's a facility in India that does complex heart bypass surgery for like $2,000 a piece. And they have a higher success rate than the Cleveland Clinic, and their infection rates are a third of the average U.S. hospital. Yep. And you can go through the website that we put together has 518 of these facilities around the world. You can actually see the prices. They actually have price transparency, which, by the way, we don't have in the United States. I don't know if you realize.
Wait, you know how much you're going to pay when you get a service?
Can you imagine such a thing?
Seems unimaginable.
What a novel idea. And then there are treatments, stem cell therapy. There are things that you're not allowed to get here. This other myth that we lead the world in innovating. You can't even get a lot of innovative treatments here, but you can get them. So once people are aware of the fact that you can go and get a hip replacement in Thailand, where, you know, a partner can come with you, business class, you stay in a resort for 2 weeks, the entire process is $30,000 plus aftercare, plus a dedicated nurse, so on and so forth. Cleveland Clinic charges $30,000 just for the hospital room before you even had any treatment or a doctor or any kind of care.
Right.
And it's mind-blowing. I've started to, I've been looking into this for a while, but when I did the deep dive, I'm like, wow, people need to know about this. 2.1 million Americans are engaging in medical tourism every year.
Well, I've done dentistry in Mexico for, a fraction of the cost and much better care.
There's a place called Molar City in Mexico. There are 350 dentists. The entire town has 5,400 people. It's the highest concentration of dentists per capita on Earth. But you'll save 80% or whatever.
What is your website? Is it live or are you still working on it?
You can get to it through daylightfreedom.org, but I can show you here today. I'll be able to show people. I just haven't punched the button yet. It's created, but we want to refine it. And Eileen's my partner on this, and she's our
well, make sure at some point you write up the whole story for Brownstone. I know you've been writing about it, but don't forget about Brownstone.
No, I won't forget. And the reason I haven't been writing lately is because we've been building 6 different things, and now because you know what it is, I got sick of, because I do these talks and everybody's like, "You just scared the F out of me," right? But the thing is, we need solutions, and there are solutions.
Yeah.
So I want to show people, here's how you exit the dollar, here's how you exit the healthcare system, and then build a community around building other solutions outside of the system.
I agree. We need to master technology in order to fight technocracy.
Yep.
Right? We cannot abandon the playing field to the technocracy, or because we have some legitimate fears about AI, abandon the field to, quote, the bad guys. And just, you may have doubts about Musk, but just as an example, he just launched Grokopedia, which is an alternative to Wikipedia. Right now, we've got Wikipedia that is training all these AI models.
Grokopedia is it's fantastic.
Yes. So we need more of those.
Yeah, compared to Wikipedia. I mean, Wikipedia is so corrupt.
Yes.
It's outrageous.
I agree with Aaron on AI.
Oh, yeah?
AI is going to be a great tool, but the current capital being raised for these companies is to make money. And so most of America and the world will be on their systems. We need to build our own systems, breakaway solutions. And that's going to be the bifurcation. And AI isn't to be feared, it's to be used, but not used the way these companies want to use it, which is to control us.
Yeah. All right. Any other final comments before we finish it?
One comment on Operation Stargate. What people don't know, when Larry Ellison and Sam Altman appeared there, and it was all a love fest about mRNA vaccines, the Operation Stargate was rebranded. It was ongoing under the Biden administration, and ground had already been broken. So this is just a retread of what was going on under the Biden administration in the Trump administration. So, if you thought the Biden administration was on your side, it's the same people now.
Yeah, that was a bit of a shock when it happened, right? Because we expected something like a U-turn on a lot of this stuff,
right.
and suddenly it wasn't there, which makes you wonder who's really running things. Okay, thank you, gentlemen, so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. All right, Bobbie Ann Warner. When Jay Bhattacharya enters the room, I want everybody to stand and cheer. That's the goal. Well, hey, Bobbie Ann. Hello. Yeah, you're on. We're wearing white here around our necks. Yeah. I tried on like 3 different ties and trying to. And I put on this one. She goes, "That looks good." Okay, Warren. We're going to talk about the law and the courts. We got 2 masters of the craft here.
That's the point.
One of the great shocks that happened in the spring of 2020 was that suddenly the Bill of Rights went away, and we didn't have any way to litigate it, to get it back, because the courts were all closed. The lockdowns pertained to the courts too, incredibly. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we need to sit down and get this rolling. So yeah, the courts all closed, and that's a very strange thing. But Bobbie Ann and Warner Mendenhall have been both working very hard in this realm. It's not my realm, so I'm going to let them dominate the entire thing. Warner, why don't we start with you, with your latest litigations and what you have in mind?
Well, first of all, I want to mention Freedom Counsel. Freedom Counsel is a group of attorneys that grew out of the crisis, started with a small listserv of a handful of people. There are now almost 300 attorneys in the listserv, and it's continuing to grow. So we expect to add about 1 attorney per week, maybe 2, and it may accelerate, who knows. And the reality is that there's plenty to do. Like, we thought we formed for a crisis, and initially we were the COVID litigation group. No, we're Freedom Counsel now because we're trying to restore the Constitution, restore individual rights, which are still being violated today in all kinds of areas. And talking about the new businesses that are out there, one of the things that we see in Freedom Counsel is that the counselors, the lawyers now are working in the parallel economy representing some of these new businesses that are popping up. So we're getting into all kinds of areas right now, far beyond where it started, and it's supporting this parallel structure that's being built. But we still have incredible hurdles in the fights that are ongoing from COVID. And I do want to say that, and people may not realize this, but about 10 million people walked off the job in protest. So we're not alone, and there's millions of us. There's an army out there ready to reform this country, ready to restore the Constitution. And they are informed. If you go to a group of, like I went to a meeting of our Children's Hospital employees after we lost the case, and I was upset. I didn't think anybody would show up. They brought their friends, their family. We had tons of people show up at that meeting. And they were all informed, and they were informing each other, and they wanted to continue the battle in any way that they could. The other thing that I want to say is there's been billions of dollars in settlements. The corporations, and you worry about this getting redone and running it again, I think the corporations have been stung, frankly. Big corporations.
This is settlements over the mandates?
What's that? This is all over the mandates, yes.
Yeah.
And they've been stung. And there are some big cases coming. And the other thing that we just recently started to see among the attorneys is that there's a reinvestment now in the litigation from some of the attorneys who did extremely well. They have made a lot, some have made a lot of money, and they are reinvesting into kind of the mainline cases, and solo practitioners who stepped up and took on a case with 70 clients. Look, they can hardly handle that, can't really handle it. Some of the wins now are getting fed back into some of those bigger cases that a solo practitioner took a chance on. And we're seeing that. So I think it's starting to develop. It's slow. It's really slow. And then the other thing that Bobbie Ann and I have talked about is what we face in the courts. I'll just roll into that if that's okay. You know, when you try a case, you face a jury voir dire. You got a jury panel you got to deal with. And, you know, in the Shera case, they had 130 people because, you know, they were going to eliminate lots of them. Every single person who was awake on COVID was excluded from that jury. So let's just start there. Okay? And then move on to the jury instructions. The jury instructions themselves are often out of date, not appropriate for the case, and you're arguing over every word in the jury instructions. And then go on to the motions in limine. In the Shera case in particular, you know, some of you may know Scott Shera and have seen him online. He's adamant about what happened and the hospital homicides that are going on and the cabal that's basically in charge of these hospitals at this point. And guess what? Those politics had nothing to do with why his Down syndrome 19-year-old child died. Nothing. You're not supposed to bring in irrelevancies into a trial. Guess what the judge did? He opened up the door. He said, no, everything comes in. Every single thing comes in. 8 motions in limine that we filed to block different things that were not relevant to that case came into that trial over a 20-day trial period. So those are the kind of hurdles we face. And then we lost that trial. It was very informative. It was a very important trial. It showed the lack of informed consent in the hospitals. I mean, I'll give you just one quick example of the lack of informed consent. You know who signed the consent form? A hospital employee. Not Scott Shera, who's the guardian of his 19-year-old Down syndrome child, who's fairly high functioning, but still doesn't have the capacity to sign a consent form, who's right there in the room with her, with his power of attorney. And guess what it said? It said, per verbal consent, this is written by the hospital employee, Grace Shera. So supposedly the consent, the waiver that came in that hospital was approved by Grace through a verbal statement to a hospital employee. That was their waiver that provided them protections for a lot of things. And the worst part of that case was that they put a do not resuscitate on the medical record and basically implemented that and killed her.
Yeah. And you lost this case. Is that
We
right?
lost this case. And honest to God, the last minutes of her life, the family was screaming through FaceTime on an iPad. The daughter was there, dad and mom are at home, and they're saying, no, we didn't agree to do not resuscitate. Save her life. Save her life through the iPad. And nurses were out in the center area there. Doctors were milling around. No one would come into the room to reverse the morphine shot that they gave her on top of lorazepam and Presidex, which sent her into a cascade of failure and killed her. And, you know, we had testimony that had they just hit her with a reversal drug, that could have at least started to reverse what was starting to happen to her. Well, she died very quickly thereafter.
And you said to me the other day you're very bitter about the case because you don't like to lose.
I don't like to lose.
Yeah.
No, in my life, I've literally lost only over a handful of cases, like 6 cases in my lifetime that went to jury trial. So, I've got lots of cases out there, but that's a tiny percentage of losses. And I'm going to say something else that I do worry about that we were conscious of in that trial, but I'm not sure we dealt with it as best we could, but we tried. One of the things that happens, you've been litigating these things for years, and we're in this environment, and we're engaged with all of the information all the time, and we think that the jury, well, we know the jury doesn't know that, but we got to remember, and it's very hard to do, that us lawyers live in a bubble of information that is not generalizable out there. The public doesn't necessarily know what we know. And so you've got to engage in a lot of education in any trial that you're doing. And then the other thing that I think is important is that, they were traumatized too. And trauma can do lots of things, but one of the things that it does is there's blind spots with people. And they don't want to face that this hospital in Appleton, Wisconsin, where they were born, was killing people. They're taking their family members. This Appleton's a small town of 70,000 people. They're taking their family members for cancer treatments and births and anything else. And this hospital has a level of connection to that community that's very, very difficult to overcome with the jury.
That's really interesting.
And then exclude anyone who understood what was going on out there and express that in the voir dire, they're gone. So who are you left with? You're left with this Midland group of people.
Well, before we move on to the victories, let's hear about one of the saddest defeats. Bobbie, and if you're okay in talking about it, you litigated this quarantine case. For those of you who don't know, there was a plot in New York to create quarantine camps. Actually, I think it was probably it was on the verge of being nationwide. At least according to the CDC, I've speculated that one of the reasons they kept the schools closed so long was because they wanted to use them for quarantine camps. And that's not just me. The CDC said this in a memo sometime in the spring of 2020. So, but you won that case, but it was reversed not by a jury, but by a panel of appellate judges.
Mm-hmm. Right. So anybody that's not familiar with the quarantine camp lawsuit, New York had a regulation which was issued by the Department of Health. It was not something that went through the legislature. So it was not a law. It was a regulation. And it said that the Department of Health could remove you from your home with the force of police and put you into a detention center, facility, camp, whatever noun you want to choose, and that they could put you there for however long they wanted. There was no time limit. And your only way to regain your freedom was for you to hire an attorney and sue your way out. You had no right to an attorney until after you were locked up, and they didn't have to prove you were sick.
Yeah. And now this happened under Cuomo, you said.
This started under then Governor Cuomo, and then once he stepped down in the summer of 2021, Hochul, who's the current governor, picked it up and ran with it. So it had been ongoing. So I sued in 2022, the beginning of 2022, I sued the New York State Department of Health, Governor Hochul, and others. And we won that case. And the argument was not scientific. Quarantines don't work. No, I didn't go anywhere near the science because the courts at that time during COVID, the height of COVID, they were not listening to scientific arguments. People were losing left and right, trying to argue science. Masks don't work, quarantines don't work. So we went with a legal constitutional argument of separation of powers. The governor and the Department of Health cannot create a regulation that overrules a law, because we already have a quarantine law in New York State, which is full of due process. Every state has their own quarantine law. And so we won. The court struck down the regulations, that it was unconstitutional on multiple levels. And then Hochul appeals the case. And as Jeffrey said, the appellate court, which is a panel of 5 judges, appointed by the governor, reversed and said, my plaintiffs had no standing. I was representing a group of New York State legislators who were saying, hey guys, wrong branch of government, you took our power. The legislature has that power to change the law, not the Department of Health and the governor. So they apparently don't have standing, which is completely untrue. They do have standing as per case law in the highest court of New York State. So we then appealed to the highest court in New York State twice. I appealed once as of right, which means they have to take the case because it's a constitutional case. Their ruling came down that it was not a constitutional case, shockingly, even though we're arguing about the Constitution. So they wouldn't hear the case. So then I appealed again, this time not as of right, but asking the court on their own volition to hear the case. And, the argument was, hey, this is good for humanity. We shouldn't have the governor and the Department of Health ruling the state and the legislature having no power. That would kind of be lopsided, right? And just January, February of this year, so 3 years later, they had their final ruling and said, nope, we are not going to hear the case. So as of today, the quarantine camp regulation does not exist because we did get it struck down when it was still in an emergency phase. They were working to make it permanent, but we got it shot down before they were able to make it permanent, thank goodness. But what it means is that Hochul and the Department of Health can reissue that regulation whenever they want.
Yeah.
They would have to go through the steps, again, of issuing a regulation, but they could do that. And there would be nobody to stop them because, it's a regulation. They don't have to go through the legislature. Not that the legislature would stand up to them on that. That was a huge awakening to the fact that courts, particularly state courts, depending on what state you're in, are going to play politics.
Yep.
I mean, I had another case right after the quarantine case, another, win at the trial court level. This was to fight New York State's, they wanted to change the state constitution to put in a bunch of, anti-parental rights, anti-women's rights, anti-girls' rights. It was, allowing boys and girls sports and men in women's locker rooms and parents no control over the children. And this was the fallout from this Prop 1. So a colleague of mine and I sued and said, hey, you can't do it this way. This is not how you amend the New York State Constitution. You guys skipped a step. And the judge agreed. The trial judge agreed, ruled in our favor, said you cannot put this proposal on the ballot. This was for last year's ballot, 2024. And the state appealed and went to the appellate court, where there are a panel of 5 judges who are all appointed by the governor, and they reversed our win on some baloney, which was not true or correct, and contrary to ruling case law. And again, we appealed to the state's highest court. We said, you have to take this case. No, wouldn't hear the case, shot us down. Wouldn't even hear the case. So it's a pattern. It's a pattern. So we have to be really cognizant of what we're doing and how we're doing it. And I think, Warner and I talked about this. It is really important that the Department of Justice get involved with some of these issues that, there are certain things you can't fight as a non-governmental attorney. I can't just bring any lawsuit. I get phone calls, emails, text messages every day, all day. Hey, why don't you bring this lawsuit? Why don't you bring that lawsuit? There are certain things that you can't bring with a private right of action that the government has to bring, right? The federal government has to come in and say, hey, you can't do that. You know, New York, you're out of step, or, you know, California, you're out of step. And those kinds of lawsuits are going on right now. I wish there were more of them going on, but it's a delicate balance, and lawsuits take time, lawsuits take energy, lawsuits take money, lawsuits take resources. So, like Warner said, it's a slow process.
Go ahead.
I want to put an exclamation mark on something she said. And even though New York, I think, is somewhat corrupted in terms of its appellate judges, generally what we found, and I made the same mistakes you made in some early cases where we're trying to argue the science. We're trying to get an expert on, you know, on masking and this and that. And the science really, we found out, doesn't win a lot. You think you're looking at clear science, the Bangladesh mask study or whatever you want to pull out, it don't matter. You know, what really does matter, and what has mattered throughout the litigation, I think it's very clear, is that we ground what we're doing in local charters, state constitutions, and the federal constitution. And when we do that, then we actually, because disease doesn't trump the Constitution. It never has.
There's no emergency.
There's no emergency
clause
that takes out
right.
the Constitution. So it is, and we actually have seen that the Article III courts were incredibly important through this process. Look, it's a mixed bag, okay? I mean, we won some, we lost some. There's lots of bodies along the way. But, you know, those Article III courts were the last functioning bastion that we had to fight in, that we could get into. And then when we went there, we argued the Constitution. We argued the law. The Loper decision was really important because we argued, hey, you're beyond your administrative scope that was granted to you. We had 2 quarantine cases in Ohio that we won on that basis, that the legislature had set up this process. And, well, the one was criminal, the one was civil, and, oh, no, you can't do that. You have to have an order signed this way by so-and-so. You know, you can't arrest that mom. You know, and the court threw that out, like, in the second day. So, you know, those are things that we've got to ground ourselves in, understand what the scope of the grant to the administrative bodies is, and understand what the constitutional basis is. And those seem to be the ways that we've won. And that's the kind of stuff that does what we're trying to do in Freedom Council and you're trying to do, is restore these basic, you know, political ethics that were set up in the Constitution of the United States.
Before we move on to other victories, I do want to call out the fact that we do have Dr. Kirk Moore. I wonder if you could just stand up here real quick. Just stand up. Come on. This is a great man who was accused of issuing, how should I say, illicit vaccine certifications, passports, to all right, here in Utah, and then actually was prosecuted because for various reasons, and spent some time in jail, a month, and was recently had the case completely dismissed. Am I getting this right? Completely dismissed under the influence of Pam Bondi. So God bless her. And we're glad you're free, and you're a hero in our eyes. So. Pleasure.
And we know, Jeffrey, that there's other doctors in this room that did the same thing.
Yeah?
You know,
oh, really? Would you like to stand up?
But I mean, really, you know, it just, Kirk has told his own story, you know, many times. But, you know, I mean, there's there are problems when people stand up to do the right thing, and there are people who do want to undercut you in the process.
Well, it's also, I think that the key, though, is what we're working towards, attorneys in Freedom Council and us personally, is to restore, not just defend the Constitution, but to restore the Constitution, because it is something that has been completely disregarded, misunderstood. People don't fight for their rights if they don't know what their rights are. And in schools today, I can tell you firsthand, for a fact, they do not teach civics classes anymore. They do that for a reason, right? Whether it's a state school or it's a private school or it's a parochial school, you're not seeing civics classes like we had when we grew up. If you don't know your rights, you're not going to stand up for your rights. And like Warner said, there's no emergency escape clause in the Constitution. So these courts across the country have been ignoring and disregarding the Constitution, and they're continuing to do it today. The legislatures, the bureaucrats, the administrative state, they couldn't care less what the Constitution says. In fact, I'm sure they don't even know what the Constitution says. They do what they want. And then it's this, a phrase that I've written a couple articles, catch me if you can, right? I'm going to do what I want, whether it's the legislature, whether it's Congress, whether it's, a bureaucrat, whether it's a Department of Health or a Department of Education. I'm going to do what I want. You can come get me. You can bring a lawsuit. You can try and stop me. And if you stop me, if the court says I have to stop, maybe I'll stop. But if the court doesn't say I have to stop, I'm just going to keep going and doing what I'm doing, which is, in essence, taking your rights away from you. So there is this really big need for a re-evaluation of the way that the bureaucrats, the administrative state, the legislatures, the politicians view and proceed within the confines of the Constitution. I say this anytime I'm giving a speech. The Constitution was written to keep the government in check. The Constitution wasn't written to keep you in check, right? That's a really important fact. And we've lost sight of that. The courts have lost sight of that, the politicians have, and even the people have. And the tool that they use is fear, right? I know you're scared of whatever it is, this big bad virus. I know you're scared of, the air pollution and, climate change. Give us your consent, give us your power, and we'll keep you safe. Just do this, and we'll keep you safe. Brownstone grew out of the pandemic, right? But the specific thing it grew out of was the lockdowns, right? Brownstone came about because these lockdowns were nationwide, and Jeffrey and some other bold people said, wait a minute, hang on. No, right? This is not right. Now, what happened as a result of that? We've seen, I'm just going on Brownstone's website and read some of the 3,000 articles on there. We've seen the negative impact of those lockdowns, right? The carnage that followed. I saw it personally where in my practice, I had people reaching out to me left and right, desperate for legal help because they had to close their business. They couldn't pay their rent. They couldn't pay their mortgage. They were going to lose their life investment. And help me. Oh my gosh, what do I do here?
They couldn't collect their rent.
No.
Right? That was the rent moratorium.
There was the CDC.
I forget about that. God.
Well,
The CDC.
Let's remember, almost
CDC.
30% of small businesses failed
Yeah.
with what happened.
Yeah.
And I mean, I had friends that their businesses went away or they chose to retire and close it up and let all the employees go. But it's 30%. Small business is the greatest driver of employment in this country.
Yeah.
Small business, not big businesses.
Yeah.
Big businesses are cutting back. They're using AI. They're scaling
Has there
back.
been any litigation on this particular point?
Yes, there is, yeah.
And,
I mean, I'll give you the broadest scope that failed. The first issue that popped up was this a taking?
right.
Violation of the Constitution.
Fifth Amendment.
And that basically failed.
But it is.
It is a taking. Yeah, it is a taking.
The Fifth Amendment said
But
you
the
can't do that.
amount, I mean, and I think the reason it failed is, can you imagine the trillions of dollars that got flushed down the toilet by closing these businesses? The government couldn't even afford to pay what the taking cost.
But if it's too expensive to enforce the Constitution, then
Well, that should not be the case. But I just want people to understand where this should be classified and that something should have happened. The second area of litigation on that was insurance coverage for business shutdowns. And that also, there's been some success in that area, the insurance coverage, but there's been a lot of failure in that area too. People bought policies to protect for business closure, for natural disasters and other things.
and they tried and they failed.
There has been limited
they
success.
Which I'm a little sympathetic with that. I mean, it's not as if the insurers expected, these kinds of edicts.
Yeah.
They have carve-outs for, pandemics now,
Pandemics,
right? They have
yeah.
pandemic carve-outs. But just to connect the dots, when they did these lockdowns and people were big businesses were going belly up and people were really experiencing, horrible mental negative impacts, not just from the isolation, but also from the financial burden that was now being thrust upon them. Remember, folks, the government did that to its people. The government, not the virus, not the person next door to you, the government did that to everybody. And then what did the government do? Oh, March, within a month, maybe two the most, the CARES Act. $2.1 trillion worth of spending that they issued, doling it out to the citizens, right? Giving it to keep everybody, afloat, whatever. What did they do in that time period, as Jeffrey said? The CDC simultaneously issues, the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, issues a nationwide eviction moratorium, announcing that you can't evict your tenants if they stop paying rent, because if you do, that eviction will cause further spread of COVID.
Yeah, because we don't want people wandering the streets spreading COVID.
Completely absurd, but they got away with it for over a year. The courts would not hear an eviction case for over a year. Yeah. What does that do? And the CARES Act money, the $2.1 trillion, is not going to the landlords as a rent voucher. No, it's going directly to the tenants who are, as I had landlords calling me up daily, my tenants won't pay rent, but I just saw them walking into their apartment with a brand new big screen TV. Right?
Well, I'm laughing.
And let's tie this to some bigger movement that's going on out there. So you kill the landlords, and there are a lot of small landlords out there.
Yeah.
The large
So
majority are
You're
mom and
killing
pop.
them, and they're going bankrupt. And BlackRock's coming in and buying up those properties, and you will own nothing.
Yes.
They do not like these small mom and pop landlords. They don't like these small mom and pop businesses, because what does that do? They're independent thinking people who won't necessarily go along with the programs.
Yes. And there was this, it took over a year, it took a year and a half for the lawsuit filed against, the lockdown, the nationwide eviction moratoriums, finally goes up to SCOTUS. SCOTUS finally says, nope, sorry, CDC, wrong branch of government. Congress could do that, which they never would, because that would be political suicide. But you can't do that. You're an agency. But why did it do it? Because it's an agency. And they're not elected. They're unelected bureaucrats, and they can't be removed, right? So the CDC did it. They get away with it. By the way, in New York, they continued that eviction moratorium for another year. So you had some landlords in New York State that couldn't collect rent for 2 years. It was done intentionally, and it was done with a a very sly hand. I have to say, the other thing, a year later, right, so that was March of 2020, March of 2021, the federal government issues they called it the American Rescue Plan. I wrote it down so I wouldn't get it wrong. The American Rescue Plan, that was another $1.9 trillion that they started to dole out, right? So what are they doing? They're increasing our debt, and they are putting a Band-Aid on the real problem, but this is all stemming from what they did. They locked everybody down for months on end. And it's people, it's like this, you know, you said yesterday at some point, you know, people want to just pretend, I think it was your opening statement, people just want to pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, we are still recovering.
Yeah.
I mean, from the legal end and the calls I get in my office, can you help me with this? Can you help me? People are still recovering.
Yeah. Quickly on the Supreme Court ruling on the rental moratorium, about which I had forgotten. Does that entitle the victims of these policies to some sort of compensation?
No. It only said, CDC, you can't do this.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, that would probably bankrupt them if they had to pay
Again,
that,
yeah,
right? I mean,
it's a taking, same kind of issue.
Yeah. So they got away with it, in other words.
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
The agencies doing, you know, what they're doing over these past 5 years, whether it's state level or it's federal level, a lot of what they're doing is, you know, what we would call unconstitutional. They don't have the power to do it.
Yeah.
But they're doing it anyway, and sometimes the legislature steps back and says, oh, well, better for them to do it, like in the case of the nationwide eviction moratorium.
Right.
Better for the agency to do
I haven't thought about
it.
this issue in a long time. The reporter asked me the other day if I'm sad or otherwise, you know, alarmed by the gutting of the CDC. You know.
Right.
What? This is the worst agency in the history of humanity. Well, listen, before we end, let's end on a high note, because you have a lot of promising litigation, right, Warner?
Yeah, there is a ton of very...
What are the highlights?
Well, I'm going to tell you, the Pfizer case still exists. It's been 5 years since Brooke Jackson stood up.
Yep.
And it's morphing in a way because we now know about the DNA contamination, the SV40, the open frame. And I'm going to say this. I mean, there's a lot of criticism of the Trump administration. But, you know, under the Biden administration, do you think anybody would talk to us about this stuff?
Right.
Guess what? Under the Trump administration, they have.
Yeah.
You know, we have met with the FDA over these issues. We've met with HHS over these issues. We've met with the FBI over these issues. Okay? So the Trump administration, for all its faults, at least we have some communications. And I do want to point out something else that we talked about yesterday. We were going to be kind of vague about this. But, well, the reality is, and I'm tying it back into what Bobbie said earlier, we actually have people within the DOJ and newly minted U.S. attorneys that they want these cases.
Yeah.
So the constitutional grounds that that are out there, and then the administrative grounds that only the government can vindicate, we have some real allies. This is real. And it's not, you hear 240 people in HHS for Kennedy. You think that's not doing anything? Well, it is doing something.
It's doing something. Yeah.
It's doing something. And I think, and freedom counselors, that's the other thing. Because Freedom Counsel was set up, some of them, they're sort of pre-vetted. And some of them have been pulled into some very important positions.
So you're the one running things?
No, I wish. Okay. No. But, the other thing about that is we submitted a bunch of names right when the administration was coming in, and it just seemed like nothing was happening. Well, 6 months later, 8 months later, it is happening. And I'm like, okay, it wasn't worth, we were kind of wondering. We'd given them a bunch of names of people who were willing to serve.
Yeah.
They're now starting to get picked up. So
There still are a lot of, people, I know yesterday there was some lamenting about, things are moving so slowly, in the administration, whatever. I just want to point out, Trump administration is facing, I think it's between something like 250, 300 lawsuits. We're only 10 months into, no, we're only 9 months into the administration. Hundreds of lawsuits filed against them to try to stop them from what they're trying to do, right? So
And the Supreme Court has actually been pretty good about this, I would say.
Yes, there were a couple decisions I did not agree with, but for the most part, they are honoring separation of powers. This is all separation of powers.
And this is a big deal. First time in 100 years, actually.
It's
a big deal.
This is things like challenging Trump taking over the Metro Police in Washington, D.C. to try to, quell the unrest and lower crime rates. They're suing him over that. They're suing him over sending the National Guard into Portland, Oregon, where ICE agents, an ICE detention center was being violently attacked, set on fire, ICE agents being attacked individually, one confronted with a knife. Crazy stuff that's going on. He sends in the National Guard. They're suing him so that the National Guard doesn't go in to protect the ICE facility and the ICE agents. Suing him over, let's see, what else? His deportation of criminal illegal aliens. They are suing him.
Yeah, this is a big topic, and we could do a totally separate panel on this. And it pertains to everything, really. He's trying to get rid of this governor, one of the Fed board governors, on grounds of mortgage fraud or whatever, which legislation. And it entitles him to do this, and the courts have now stopped it, so that's going to the Supreme Court. So a lot of things brewing, but I think we have to leave it there. But I do need to make a call to Politico and tell them who's really in charge.
And Aaron, I'm sorry we didn't even get to the AI, and we actually did talk about the AI bit, so we'll fill you in. There's so many topics. Honestly, we could talk all day long. It's crazy. And we had a whole healthcare thing we didn't even touch on.
Yeah.
I know.
The time goes too quick.
Affordable Health Care Act, the
Unaffordable
Health Care Act.
Well, thank you all.
Bobbie Ann.
Thank you.
All right, we'll take a break and come back and hear about homeopathy and other matters.
No, I think I'm moderating.
Oh, you're moderating.
Jeffrey, here, yeah?
Yeah, we're trying her out and moderate.
Oh, how fun.
All right.
Trying me out.
Oh, that's good.
We need Ryan. Ryan.
Oh, those are great. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, no, they're brutal. He's coming.
All right, we're gonna do something very special here.
Check, check.
We are.
Hello, everybody.
Check, check.
We're going to try out a new moderator.
Try out.
This is her audition. You're auditioning for the post?
I guess.
This is an audition. Leslie Newcan is auditioning as a substitute moderator. So, Leslie, I'll let you introduce
Okay. I think we should start out with shoes, Ryan.
Uh-oh.
Oh, gosh.
I have leopard skin. He's got on some, I don't
Yours
know
are
what
very
they are.
nice as well.
So we go from the nicest ones to the ugliest ones.
I'd go barefoot.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that.
So you will know from yesterday that I have a history in finance. I also made a documentary film, and then I founded Health Freedom Defense Fund. But before I did the final two, I actually became a homeopath. So I had all sorts of health issues subsequent to a bunch of vaccines that I received when I was 28 years old and had just graduated from business school before I went to go and start work in New York on Wall Street. And it's taken me over 30 years to regain my health, or to at least get back to a semblance of health. It's been very, very difficult. And I was living in London and getting sicker and sicker, not understanding what was wrong with me, kept going to the doctor, and my Harley Street doctor, which is, you know, a very, very main street, kind of very, it's like going to a Park Avenue doctor in New York, said to me, I know you're sick, you know you're sick, I can't help you, mainstream medicine can't help you, you need to go and see an acupuncturist or a homeopath. And people probably don't know this, but there are homeopathic hospitals still in Britain. Mm-hmm. And in this country, there were about, 100 homeopathic hospitals at the turn of the 20th century. And most people don't know the history at all of health, medicine, well-being in this country. It's far more complex and diverse than what we have today. And I would even argue that what we have today is not about health at all. It's about sick care. But anyway, so I became a homeopath because I went and saw a homeopath, and it was life-changing. It resonated so very deeply with me. And so what I really want to do with this panel is explore what's happened to get us to where we are today. We've heard in the last panel, or the panel this morning, that some families can pay $50,000 a year to keep their insurance. What is the purpose of this? But actually, I forgot. Sorry, Jeffrey. Why don't you introduce yourselves?
Sure. Dr. Ryan Cole. Thank you. So I'm a senior fellow with the Independent Medical Alliance, board-certified Mayo Clinic-trained pathologist, and medical freedom fighter.
I'm Sarah Thompson. I practice and teach homeopathy in classical tradition. I'm based in Maine, but I work all over the country and all over the world. And what I am excited about, in addition to what we're talking about here with health and medicine, is the language of health and medicine and the narrative of health and medicine. And so when I have the mic, I'm going to talk about words a little bit before I even talk about homeopathy.
Sure.
And I am Joe Varon. I'm the President and Chief Medical Officer of the Independent Medical Alliance. And I'm the classic example of somebody that would think that everybody in this room was crazy. and now I am 100% with the program. And, it's been a transition. For all of us, it's been a transition. For me, I'm almost like you, about 11 years ago, I had a stroke. And the day after the stroke, the social worker comes to my room in the ICU and says, Dr. Varon, I have great news for you. You can go on disability. I said, that's great news. Because I wasn't able to walk. I mean, I lost my walk. So I said, hell no, I'm going to try whatever I have to try in order to get myself better. So I never used a wheelchair. 6 weeks later, I was already scuba diving in Bali. And I tried acupuncture, just like you. I mean, I went and started to look at things. And even though I have been one of those people that always is thinking outside the box, I was pretty much with the program. I mean, I was very inclined to listen to the biology and stuff like that. So when you start getting confronted with things that you cannot explain, you know, when I was talking, for example, my daughter, who's the acupuncturist, and she says, no, that is the meridians and the yin and the yang. Is like, I don't speak that language. But it is amazing how the last 5 years, we're becoming all very good at learning, at being part of this, and at collaborating. That's one of the most important things. We are now collaborating. We are not God. We cannot take care of a patient all by ourselves. Now we're doing this in a team approach. At least in my practice, we have Western medicine and Eastern medicine. We combine them. My daughter does I call it the hocus pocus part, and I do the other, and I do the other part. But in all honesty, I mean, it works. You see our vaccine injured patients, they come to us. I give them all our beautiful things that we have developed through the IMA and things like that. And then I said, well, why don't you just do your thing? And between both of us, these people get great outcomes. Mm-hmm. So I don't know why America has not opened their eyes. These are therapeutic interventions that have been going on for thousands of years. They work.
Well, and that's a great point. And Sarah brings up the point of changing the lexicon. So the panel is alternative healthcare. Well, like Bret said last night, we need to go on the offense, and part of that is with the lexicon. So, like Joe mentioned, we have traditional healthcare, but why do we call this alternative when modern medicine's only been around for about 100 years, you know, based on the whole Rockefeller system, et cetera? What we're practicing and doing and teaching is innovative healthcare, not alternative. Mm-hmm. And this whole construct, majority of your physicians think MD means minor deity. But they tend to be intellectual troglodytes that are stuck in a paradigm taught to them by algorithms and systems rather than being critical thinkers. The first death in COVID was actually critical thinking. And so this is where we need to reframe what health is. But what Leslie did, what Joe did, is what each and every one of you need to do. And all of us, if we're going to reclaim our liberty, our freedom, our health, our wellness, is we don't need to put our trust in the system. And, you know, many of you heard me joke time and again, the best doctor you'll ever meet is in this room right now. And I don't say that out of arrogance. I say it because you are the best doctor you will ever meet. Yeah. Nobody knows your body, your needs, what you can do better than you do. And so doctor in Latin means teacher, not authority. And so if you have a good physician, he or she should be teaching you so that you can take charge of your own health, optimize the things that you need to do on a daily basis to be your own best doctor.
And so can I just... I think for the benefit of everybody in the room, it would be really helpful, Sarah, if you would talk a little bit about homeopathy, how it came to be, the development of the American Institute of Homeopathy, the AMA, 3 years later, just to give us a little bit of context as we unpack this.
Well, there's something I want to say before I do that, which is, I don't know where Jeffrey is now. There he is. So the first thing to think about is when we're looking at the question of health, what we're doing right now is part of it. And last night at dinner, we sang Happy Birthday to Cooper, who I've now called out. It's Cooper's birthday week. And so to lead us off in what becomes the atonal birthday dirge, Jeffrey intoned us into the key. And so I think what we do up here is that Jeffrey and now Leslie intone us into the key of inquiry, the key of dialogue, the key of collaboration, the key of debate, the key of curiosity. And then we have a jam session. And then we have more jam sessions. And so first, I want to thank Jeffrey for putting us on the stage and throwing on the jam and being our band leader. And then this takes me into the metaphor of music. And the root tone for the song Happy Birthday is a little low for me, so I sing in a close harmony. But when I play the banjo, clawhammer banjo, it has a drone. And on the most of the downbeats, you play this drone, this one note that is that gritty undertone beneath that high, lonesome sound. And when we are looking at what is the undertone, what is the drone of our conversation about healing, our conversation about medicine, we have to start with what is it we are trying to do with medicine. And so this is what brings me to the founder of homeopathy, a man named Samuel Hahnemann, and I think of him as the elucidator of homeopathy, the way that I think of Ludwig von Mises as the elucidator of Austrian economic theory. It's there, it's true, he just figured it out and codified it. He gave us very clear directives. They are written down in our foundational text, which all of us read regularly, that the highest and only calling of the physician, which the original homeopaths were all medical physicians. I'm not, and there are reasons why I'm not. I am a practicing homeopath, and that is very specifically what I do. That our highest and only calling is to restore the sick to health, to cure, as it is termed. And we have a definition of that. And that is that your vital force, which is this animating agency, it's not the soul, it's just this thing that is the difference between being alive and dead. We can't ever see it or know it except as it manifests in our symptoms and in our signs. That this vital force will rule with unbounded sway, that we may be free in our reason-gifted minds to pursue the highest purpose of our existence. That is the job of the physician, according to the founder of homeopathy. So based on that, the first thing to think about is this drone line of what are we trying to do with our clients and with our patients? The highest purpose of existence. This is not number go up, number go down. And so in homeopathy itself, there's 4 basic principles. And we won't get deep into the weeds with that, but the one I'm going to touch on, because it's the one that's on any of your minds right now, is the law of the minimum dose. Individuality, you get. Totality, you get. Similarity even makes sense, right? The thing that can make us sick can make us well. But what is this law of the minimum dose? And in homeopathy, we introduce the stronger similar disease. The stronger similar disease in homeopathy, I was listening to Walter Kern, I was listening to Deborah Sheldon's beautiful comment that if we're winning, it's because we have the best stories. In homeopathy, the remedial agent introduces a narrative to the vital force that shows it what could happen if it doesn't get its act together. And it speaks that language at the level of the vital force. Why do we use a minimum dose? Let me describe through metaphor and analogy why and what a maximum dose would look like. Because homeopathy is not a practice of medicine. It is a way of understanding the world, understanding our symptoms, understanding our experiences, understanding our cultural phenomena. The COVID tyranny is an example of a crude homeopathic dose of the stronger similar disease, the fast forward to what could happen if the disease that was brewing under the surface in our culture didn't get addressed and cured. That dose is poison. And it sometimes takes the host out. Chemo is homeopathic to cancer, but it's poison. The vital force is in this room. It responded to that remedy the COVID tyranny, and it brought on the juice to say, this is not where we want to go, guys. Let's throw this thing off. But it took a lot out of us. And it would be nice if we didn't have to get hit that hard. Yeah. So that is why we do it that way. Yeah. So I'm happy to talk more about that later.
So Joe, this is an example of how systems, structures have led us astray, right? What was it that happened for you to wake you up and help you to understand what was going on, so that you could chart a different path?
So the Great Awakening came very simple, and that's when I started to see that what we were doing was working, and what everybody else was doing out there wasn't working. When my little hospital in Houston had a mortality rate of 4%, and the rest of the country had, between 25 and 40% during COVID, I said, we're doing the right thing, even though everybody's throwing stone at us, sending us to the Texas Medical Board to go and say hi to them, and, that kind of stuff. That's it. I said, wait, this works. Using for-purpose drugs works. Using homeopathy, using acupuncture, these things work. The biggest concern that I have, especially as it pertains to homeopathy and some of these, I'm going to call it alternative, but we already discussed that it's
holistic.
Not, or holistic, is that there are a bunch of charlatans out there. And how do you determine who's good? For example, at the IMA, we have one of the things that we're doing is we are creating this trusted network of healthcare providers, people that you trust. Not somebody that's going to come in and going to put 3 needles on you and tell you, oh, you're going to be fine. I mean, we want people that truly have that. But how do you do it on a, like in a large scale? That's what we need to do. We need to find people that truly are committed to what we are committed to. Because each one of the people sitting here, we have a vocation for what we're doing. We're not in for the money. That I can tell you for facts. If not, it's a much different story. But you see most of our colleagues, even some of the colleagues that have done a lot of good work during the pandemic, now they're so commercialized. They come up with the little vitamins package deals, stuff like that, because they're seeing the income. And I'm not saying don't make money, please, by all means. But we're dealing with health. We're dealing with humans. We're dealing with a way in which we all have to collaborate. And the areas that I see specifically challenging is how do you know who to trust? And that's where we need to work together.
Well, I want to touch on one thing about that is I would so much rather know where my doctor's money is coming from than to not know. Because there are a lot of charlatans in the medical world, and we have no way of vetting that. You just, you see, I think about people, they see this MD, and then I've heard Joe speak to this horrifying phenomenon of the brain death and the, when they harvest organs, that you are going into a surgery with a total stranger. You will be at their complete mercy. You know nothing about this person. And I think this kind of networking, to me, it all comes down to we really do have to create these networks of trust. Person to person, most of my business comes from referral. And I think that's really how we do it, because any effort to create a credentialized authority inevitably gets us to the same place. We can have, the IMA, we can team up and give it a name and call it that, but then you're not just putting your stamp of approval on people. We still, I would love to be able to get deep dives on any practitioner, anytime, to be able to say, I'm interested in working with this person. Are there any of their former patients willing to talk to me?
Well, don't go to Google reviews because they'll attack all of us.
Or if not, go like, I don't know if you guys saw the post of Mary Bowden this week, that she says, oh, I want to thank the Houston Chronicle for referring so many patients to me. She says, after the hit job that they had on me last week, who referred you? The Houston Chronicle.
Well, you bring up a great point, Sarah. And okay, so I made the joke about MD meaning minor deity to a lot of physicians, but it should mean make a difference. And if your doctor doesn't care, fire your doctor. And like I said, you're your own best doctor, so you're the ones who should care. And what if I told you that the majority of medical science, medical research for the last 100, 150 years is all wrong? What if, I mean, Bret found out about the Jackson Laboratory mice and the bottleneck of the genetics and all the studies, and mice lie and monkeys deceive, and, you know, so we have so many studies based on these animal models. But what if all the great discoveries in medicine were actually mostly accidental? What if all the great discoveries in history were an apple falling on somebody's head? Because that's really how things happen. It's not like, we need a double-blinded, placebo-controlled gold standard trial, and that's the only way that we get science, the science, I am the science. But we don't get it that way. All the great science comes from observation. And an observation over an observation over an observation becomes a hypothesis, and then you test it, and then you apply it. And what if I told you that we live in a toxic environment? Would you believe me? Yeah, you would think chemicals. And you think, oh, we're all, you know, biochemical, mechanical beings. No, what if we're light beings, electromagnetic beings, and wave beings? How many people today went outside and put their feet in the bare grass and balanced the electrical charge of the cells in your body? Probably very few of us. Okay, good, some did. What if we live in a toxic environment of light that's unnatural, that makes us obese, destroys our blood pressure, destroys our blood sugar? What if we live in an environment where our food is all poisoned by a chemical called glyphosate Roundup that's actually patented in 2010 by Monsanto as an antibiotic that kills the good bacteria in your gut? What if we are living in an environment where everything that we've studied was done under blue light, which is not natural and is toxic? All the animal studies, all the lab studies, those were all done where the cells were getting the wrong input. So what if all of medicine is actually pretty wrong? And what if she's right that the minimal safe dose or the minimal necessary dose is probably the right way to do it, because it has nothing to do with the studies that have been done, because they've mostly been done incorrectly? So I guess what I'm saying is question the paradigm. Question everything.
So basically, we're in a situation where trust is a major issue. All of our institutions have been corrupted.
Burn it down.
The license, I mean, you know, all the MDs, everybody, they're licensed, right? 40,000 patients are injured every single day in American hospitals.
Yeah,
every single day.
Third leading cause of death in America is the medical system.
And in something like, I think there was a study done in some of the Carolina hospitals, 18% of hospital admissions ended up in a serious adverse event. 2.5% of those ended up in death. These were hospital errors. My point is, just being licensed doesn't matter. Well, that's, you know, this is happening by licensed credentials individuals. So what's the solution?
But, you know, we
here?
have been brainwashed that we need, well, not we, but, you know, people think that, oh, the doctor, he knows everything. And they forget. I mean, I don't know if you remember what Greeks used to say, "Kie yo iathros o pathos," who knows more about the disease than the one that has it? So I think that we are in an environment where everybody should question their doctors, because, you know, I have patients that come to me with data that I'm like, oh my gosh, and not Google data, you know, people that truly dive into what's going on, especially some of the long haul patients. I mean, they're really well educated, and the system is failing them. The system is failing them.
The system is an algorithm, and you are not a data point or a statistic, you're a human being. And once the medical profession, no matter what the practice is, if they don't see your humanity, then they don't see you in the way that the relationship, the oath, the process should occur. If they see the majority of drugs that are on the market are based on population statistics, you are not a population statistic. You are a human being.
Well, I think it was Bret posed the question yesterday. Like, how did we get here? And I'm going to go back 2,000 years, because he did. So the Brownstone Institute, just very quickly, when I the first time I ever gave a presentation for Brownstone, I knew there was an event, that there was going to be some space on the stage, and I approached Jeffrey, and I said, can I give this talk about the history of the AMA? And he said, sure, that particular event, I'll let any crazy person on the stage. He said, okay, up I got. And the talk that I gave, which I'll talk in a minute a little bit about what it was about, was based on the work of the person I consider the preeminent scholar of medical history, a man named Harris Coulter. And he died, I think, about 10 years ago. But he was the pioneer. He wrote A Shot in the Dark with Barbara Loe Fisher. He was the first one. He wrote a book about vaccines and criminology, which I think is about to come back out. So he became very much persona non grata in the publishing world and definitely in the medical world. He was a huge advocate of homeopathy because he had studied the history of medicine. He wrote this 4-volume series, books like this about the history of medicine. You can buy them from Brownstone, and I did not know when I approached Jeffrey to give that talk that they were just about to re-release those books. So you can buy them from Brownstone, and the copy that the volume they're selling is volume 3, is the one you can pick up out here. You can buy all of them online, which is the one that covers the period of the founding of the AMA in the United States, which was 1847. And a lot of people that kind of came to the realization that things had gone really off the rails during COVID started to look backwards and say, well, was this the establishment of HMOs? Was this the establishment of Medicare? Are we going back to the Flexner Report where all the medical schools that taught naturopathy, homeopathy, acupuncture all shut down? No, we're going back in the U.S. to 1847. And because what happened was, the homeopaths who had had huge success in Europe treating these serious epidemics, cholera epidemics, I mean, they were losing no patients, 2% of patients, 3% of patients, and compared to the conventional medical doctors of the time, and then, compared to people who were doing nothing for treatment, their numbers were much better. So it wasn't just that they weren't interfering. They then came to the United States in this wave of German immigration, started practicing in the United States, and people said, oh, wow, my alternatives are mercury till my teeth fall out, or this medicine, which I don't, we have no testing for medicine, so it's all magic to me. This works and doesn't hurt me. People were flocking to the homeopaths, and actually the homeopaths were able to charge much more in consulting fees. My consulting fees are much less than a conventional medical doctor, but most people don't see that because they think their insurance is paying for it. The medical doctors in the materialist tradition felt very threatened by this. Coulter documents going back to Hippocrates, who was probably not one person. There are these 4 folios, and they are kind of 2 and 2, vitalism versus mechanistic medicine. And these things have been, button heads for 2,000 years. And so the history of that brings us to the middle of the 19th century, where the medical doctors said, these folks are eating our lunch. We need to box them out of the business. We are going to establish, the homeopaths had just established the American Institute of Homeopathy, which was their professional society. We are going to establish a professional society, and the first thing we're going to do is establish something called the Consultation Clause, which will prohibit any licensed MD from consulting with a homeopath at the risk of losing their license. We heard this similar thing recently. So they did that, and so what was happening was the medical boards, there were even funny stories about married couples. One's a homeopath, one's an MD, and he loses his license. So this was going on for quite a while, but they actually weren't winning the battle. People wanted the homeopathy until the pharmaceutical companies in the late 19th century figured out, we can team up with the doctors. And pharmaceutical money started flooding into the AMA, which is what then gave them a war chest to set the ground rule, set the stage for the Flexner Report. Yeah. So and that's the recent history of how we got here. But this is an old, old war.
Yeah. But what's really at its heart is that a difference between how human life is perceived.
Absolutely.
Okay? So if you look at the physicians, they tended to look at human life as mechanistic. Something's not working, cut it out, burn it out, paint the back of the throat with arsenic or mercury if you've got a sore throat. Whereas the homeopaths were using the symptoms to guide them to the appropriate remedy, which had already been proven through these studies. What do you guys, your physicians, how do you see modern medicine in this context? It's essentially a spiritual battle. Do you believe that we are just a bag of bones? And it coincides perfectly with this digital age that we live in, right? AI, they want all your doctors to be AI. And then Borla will ensure compliance that we take our medication by chipping our pills. This is this craziness. So how do you guys feel about this spiritual versus materialistic view?
If you asked me this question 10 years ago, I would tell you, we are organisms and this is broken, we fix it. But I have changed completely my approach. I have changed my approach of being a doctor that treats to a doctor that prevents. That's something that they don't teach you in medical school. Forget about yes, you tell somebody don't eat too much salt or whatever, which by the way is nonsense, but that's a different story. But I am now just truly pushing. I spend a lot of time with my patients. Before was basically a revolving door. Get them in, get them out. Just wait for them to get sick again. How do they say, a patient cured is a customer lost? I'm serious. This is what they teach you in medical school. And that's one of the reasons we have to change our thought process.
Goldman Sachs wrote a report a couple of years ago, Is Cure a Sustainable Business Model? Mm-hmm. That was the title. But
but I think that's, so right now, I see the patients as individuals, and I actually, having been through a major illness myself at some point in time, I put them in control of their own illness. It's like, if I could do it, you can do it. Don't give me this nonsense that I want a little wheelchair and stuff like that. Don't give me these things. You have to be aware everything about your illness. I have patients that come to me with 5 different drugs for diabetes. Not one of them has had a doctor that sits with them and says, you know how much sugar a tomato has? Not one. It's ridiculous.
And I think the system, here's the good news, the AMA only represents about 12% of Americans.
Now I know they're irrelevant.
So hopefully in a few years, the Independent Medical Alliance will represent the majority of physicians.
That's the goal.
But we do have this false construct that health and wellness come from a pill, a needle, or a bottle, and it doesn't. Health and wellness is a balance of mind, body, and spirit. And if those 3 are out of order, and community, and if those are out of balance, then health and wellness won't come. And, do we suffer from, an Ozempic deficiency disorder? No. Or a statin deficiency disorder or a cardiac bypass deficiency disorder? No, we don't. Do we suffer from a toxic light overload disorder or a proper light deficiency disorder? We do. Or sleep deficiency, which goes with light, or movement disorder because we don't move enough, or a proper food deficiency disorder? Yeah, we do. So the basic things of health and wellness to be your own best doctor don't come from the system. And it's a balancing of, I would say the number 1, 2, 3 best things you can do for your health is sunlight, sunlight, sunlight. And then beyond that, sunlight, sunlight, sunlight. And then earthing and grounding. And then maybe look at food and then sleep and then movement and things of that nature. But we've falsely attributed the ability to heal and give wellness to a system that no longer does so. And that's what we need to get away from, is that mindset that someone's coming to save you and the system is there to do it. Now, medicine is a noble profession. There's still a lot of good practitioners. I don't want to say that all medicine is bad and all pharma is bad. It's not. Insulin saves my brother's life. He's type 1 diabetic. He wouldn't be alive today if it weren't for that. Thyroid replacement hormone for those like me, who've had their thyroid wiped out years ago by an autoimmune condition. There are a lot of good medicines that are useful and necessary, but don't look at medicine or a pill or a bottle or a needle to be your be-all and end-all, because it isn't. Because the majority of things that we can do for balance of the mind, mental wellness, leads to physical wellness, leads to spiritual wellness, leads to community wellness. Those things we can do without ever seeing a doctor. And a doctor, his or her goal should always be to put themselves out of business. If their patients are as healthy as they should be that teacher, they should be that coach, and it should be their goal to eventually just be a shaman in the community, there for advice when you need it. And they should. We also have an education deficiency disorder, as we've talked about in some of the panel so far, but that education is actually the physician. Medicine advances every time there's a funeral, because we're stuck 10 years in the past in modern medicine, if not 100 years in the past, to be honest. And we don't advance as a profession because we're stuck in this paternalistic, algorithmic pattern instead of, and we brought this up before the panel, there is no such thing as public health. That is a lie. There is only individual health. And MAHA is going to become HaHa if we don't focus on MyHa, which is make yourself healthy again.
Yeah. So this is where I want to go now, because it's so important. There are so many people in the MAHA movement, many of whom are in this room, who want to see Americans be healthier.
Absolutely.
Okay? And what seems to be happening, well, first of all, we know very clearly, despite 100 years of indoctrination, as you said, I say it all the time, health doesn't come in a pill bottle or an injection. It comes from eating meat and animals that are fed the way that they're supposed to, by getting sunlight, by exercising properly, grounding. It comes from eating whole foods that are nourishing, mineral rich, drinking bone broths and things like this. These are the ways that we become healthy. But the other part of it is that we don't poison ourselves. Mm-hmm. And medicine has morphed into this situation where it's seemingly poisoning us, at least modern medicine, this paradigm. And so what I'm wondering is, and then you see what's happening with MAHA. MAHA is focused so much on the food. Is that helpful? How do you guys see what's happening?
It's helpful, but it's not enough.
Amen.
I mean, it's helpful, and I truly, I applaud the efforts of MAHA, but it's not enough. You cannot just say it's the foods, that's it. I mean, you said something that I tell my patients. Movement is medicine. Just moving, for God's sake. People don't walk. I take my car to go from here to the other thing. I mean, and I'm the one supposed to be teaching people to it. We need to change this concept that, you go to the doctor just because he's going to fix you, give you that little pill thing. And if the one pill doesn't do the trick, you go again, and then he gives you 2 pills. And if that doesn't do the trick, you find a new doctor, and then he gives you 3 pills, but he cures you, quote unquote. I mean, nobody's curing you. You're going to be able to cure yourself. Patients need to be empowered, but they need to be responsible. They need to be part of this. And I think that that's one of the things that you guys do in homeopathy.
So let me just say, how are we going to get accurate information? Because you look at, cholesterol is one of the biggest lies ever told. Now it's high blood pressure. People, high blood pressure, this is the next thing that they're doing. All these blood pressure medicines are so dangerous, and all they do is once they achieve penetrate the market, then they just lower the threshold so that they can get more.
Yeah, normal cholesterol used to be 300 till they came up with a pill. Then they moved it down to 220. Now they're trying to move it down to 200 because they have a pill that can do it, but people with higher cholesterol live longer,
yes,
especially women.
Same thing with high blood pressure. My point is, how does the public actually get accurate information? Because they're being deceived by the media, by the universities, by the journals, by all the medical publications. I read this week that ABC World News Tonight took in $15 million in 1 month in advertisements from the pharmaceutical industry in 1 month.
Well, so the pharmaceutical industry, I think Kim used the phrase sales funnel to talk about the lead magnet in the schools with the psych eval. But the pharmaceutical industry is not a sales funnel. It's the sales funnel. It's the most successful sales funnel in the history of humanity. It starts before birth. You are indoctrinated at the moment of birth, if you're born in a hospital, that there's some kind of deficiency. You are so you're born, you're fallen, that's the fall. You're deficient in your medicine, but you can go to the doctor, and the word used to be synonymous, right? The doctor and the priest. You go to the doctor, you receive the sacrament. That's a level of, you're atoning. You're still not going to get out of it alive. If you continue to have symptoms we don't have a pill for, then those must be things you're supposed to live with. So this sales funnel is this phenomenal thing that is just so baked in. And, I would ask a question. It's too personal questions, so I'm not going to ask it. Just raise your hand, your head. Is like, if I ask people, how many people in this room take supplements or use adjuncts to their food and healing and all this stuff, that can still be a pop a pill mentality. And I'm not saying that those things are necessarily bad. So our doctors are not psychopaths, but our medical system is psychopathic. And and people will come to me and I say, they're just coming to me because they want to escape a psychopathic medical system. They don't even know that homeopathy, I don't care, just get me out. But, you're sitting in this room. By this early afternoon, you're going to feel a little uncomfortable. You're going to be like, I'm kind of sleepy, I'm kind of off, what's going on? This is what's going on. And these are what's going on.
And 5G, I'm sorry, but people have to understand all of this Wi-Fi stuff.
So again, when we talk about the law of the minimum dose, and I love to joke about it, but think about what's actually making you sick. It's not stuff you see under a microscope. And so, but the stuff you see under the microscope is important. It's just downstream.
It is.
And so I think all of us have a responsibility not to look for or talk about any kind of magic bullet that isn't what God gave us to be healthy already. Sunlight, earth, real food. That stuff's a magic bullet.
And I think we get away from our childhood fables like Goldilocks. Just enough, not too much. And we need to change the rubric and the mindset of this era in which we live, which is an era of wealth and wellness, and we need to get back to an era of health and wellness.
Thank you, everyone. Did you want to do something?
She's doing a great job, huh?
Thanks, Leslie.
So you get the post. she's hired.
You're hired. Now, I'm very happy to.
It's already connected.
Forgive me, this was a little bit on short notice. I was supposed to be sitting down to a nice, pleasant chat with Jeffrey or someone else, and he decided on short notice that I should give a formal talk. So what I did, just to be open and transparent, because that's our theme here, is I took the talk that I gave 2 weeks ago at the European Parliament and cut it down and restructured a little bit on short notice. And this was, at the time, focused on meeting at the EP in Brussels for the launch of the Make Europe Healthy Again movement, which was well received. But you're going to notice a little bit of Euro talk in this. Forgive me, but I think with the parts that I left in here, I think are useful. And I'm going to start with the caveats that I absolutely have to give. Remember that we're being broadcast here. I was reminded by that in that a friend of ours sent some snapshots when Jill was on that session yesterday that had been streaming. So I have to be sensitive to the fact that I'm not just speaking to this room. I'm speaking to unknown others, which may include our good friends in corporate media. Therefore, I must provide the following caveats. The title of the talk, The Maha Movement, A View from Within. I'm a Maryland licensed physician and serve as the co-chair of the CDC Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, as well as medical advisor to Maha Alliance, 501c4. Technically, in my current work supporting the federal administration, I serve as a, quote, special government employee without pay. It's an odd little category. It's the thing that Elon Musk was doing, Kelly Means, etc. So therefore, I need to say, the opinions expressed here are my own and do not necessarily represent those of the U.S. government, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control or Prevention, or the CDC Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. There, we got that part out. Starting, let's focus for a moment on medical ethics. I hope and trust that you share my strong support for both individual informed consent as defined in the Nuremberg Accords and the Helsinki Agreement, as well as the principle of subsidiarity enshrined in both the doctrines of the Catholic Church, as well as Article 3 of the Treaty of the European Union. Frankly, I think it's one thing that could be done to strengthen our Constitution is to include a clause akin to the subsidiarity clause that exists in the treaty that founds the European Union. What is that? This component of the European Union Treaty states that, quote, under the principle of subsidiarity in areas that do not fall within its exclusive competence, the Union, that's the European Union, shall act only if and insofar as the objectives of the proposed action cannot be sufficiently achieved by the member states, either at central level or at regional and local level, but rather, by reason of scale or effectiveness of the proposed action, be better achieved at Union level. Now, this is kind of akin to states' rights, but it extends a lot further. The principle of subsidiarity really is the logic that should extend all the way down to our school boards. That the core of the principle is that the most competent local authority shall be empowered to make policy decisions, to make crucial decisions. And this is anathema to what we call the administrative state or the bureaucratic state. This is the core logic that supports the underlying principle. And again, this is so foundational, it's baked into at least the logic of the Catholic Church, whether or not they recognize it from time to time. All bureaucracies fall short of their intention. But the idea is that those that have the competence at the closest local level should be the ones making the decision. This is radical in many ways, and yet it's fundamental historically in human governance. It goes on, the institutions of the Union shall apply the principle of subsidiarity as laid down in the protocol on the application of the principles of subsidiarity and proportionality. Action should be proportional to the need. National parliaments ensure effective implementation of the principle of subsidiarity through the procedure set out in that protocol. The analogy is, of course, that the national governments in the European Union are akin to the state governments here in the United States. In my opinion, in medical matters, the patient is the lowest effective level of governance. For if we're not allowed to govern our own bodies and what medical treatments we accept, then there is no personal freedom and there can be no proportionality. Under the principle of subsidiarity, you are the ones that have the right to govern what happens to your body. The cornerstone of this ethical structure is the principles of patient-informed consent, which were widely violated during COVID. I think we can all agree on that. In a free society, citizens must have the freedom to decide what medical procedures they wish to accept for themselves and their children. They must be provided complete, transparent access to the full spectrum of information concerning risks and benefits of procedure, including vaccination. And they must be allowed to choose whether to accept a medical procedure, whether or not it is an experimental procedure, without being subjected to coercion, compulsion, or enticement. The interests of the collective society should not outweigh the rights of the individual to bodily autonomy. This is fundamental. This is the core of 20th century bioethics, which, by the way, just as an aside, have now, I doubt there are anybody here that's monitoring what's going on in the universities concerning ethics and medical ethics. But in the 21st century, this has all been transformed. They literally call it utilitarian bioethics. And it's structured under the thesis that what should be optimized is the greatest happiness for the greatest number. Now, y'all can figure out where that goes, because then the power resides in who gets to define happiness. Okay? And that is the basis, that is the structural underpinnings of modern public health. When we grapple with what's going on in the CDC, what's going on across all of HHS, what's going across the entire Western medical system, what we're dealing with is the modern thesis of utilitarian bioethics that the state should act to optimize the greatest happiness for the greatest number. The toll in economic and social damage, sickness, death, and loss of faith and legitimacy for public health and the healing professions consequent to the last 5 years of twisted public policies is profound and cannot be easily repaired. Consequent to this heavy-handed mismanagement, we now face a crisis of confidence in public health and medical caregiver legitimacy in both the United States and Europe. By the way, this is not happening so much in the outlying economic subsidiary states like in Africa, for instance, what we used to call the emerging economies. This is a Western problem. The big difference in the political climate and affairs between the United States and the European Union is the outcome of the recent leadership elections. The Europeans have Ursula von der Leyen. If you're not tracking that, she heads the European Commission, which is all appointed. So you think things are bad here, it can be worse. Here in the United States, we have Donald Trump and his close ally, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. This talk that I'm giving you here today is a profoundly optimistic talk. We've heard a lot of forgive me, nattering nabobs of negativism talking about how this isn't being done and that isn't being done, and it's not being done fast enough, and God damn it, what's going on? I can tell you from without telling tales from my perch on the inside, this is incredibly complex. What we're dealing with right now is a hostile takeover of the federal government and particularly HHS, and they don't like it very much. And they are using every means in their power to resist it, okay? And that includes their reach over the information outlet of approved narratives that we call corporate media, which is where Brownstone comes in. Just to put a little bit of leavening here, you folks, your business, our business here, is to overthrow the false promoted narratives and substitute truth. That's it. It's long past time for this political, social, and government commitment. President Trump and Senator Kennedy and Secretary, I make that Freudian slip all too often. Secretary Kennedy share a deep, long-standing commitment to the overall health of the citizens they serve, in particular to America's children. With all of the rhetoric and weaponized hate currently being deployed against both of these transformational leaders, because that's what they are, what is often overlooked is they are unified in their commitment to a better future for our children. We never hear that part of Donald Trump. Donald Trump cares about kids. He really does. Secretary Kennedy cares about children. It is one of the things that brings them together and creates a common bond and a common objective. As I was saying, it's a long past time for this political, social, and government commitment. As President Trump has often pointed out, data demonstrate that if nothing is done, America's children will live shorter, sicker lives than those of their parents. Now, if that's not a mic drop moment, I don't know what is. So let's talk about the Maha Commission. What's being done about this? You know, we were sitting here talking about, oh my God, so little is being done. It's so slow. Step back for a moment, okay? We're 9 months in, folks. What's going on? The Maha Commission. To understand and fix this situation, President Trump has launched an all-of-government response, in some ways similar to what he did for COVID with Operation Warp Speed. Nobody wants to hear that, okay? What happened, I disagree, as I think many of you do, with the work product of Operation Warp Speed. But in terms of getting the federal government to get off its butt and get something done and break through the silos, it was an amazing moment. That effort was transformational. And Trump is bringing that same skill set, that goddammit get it done momentum, to this transformational idea of promoting health instead of treating sickness that is at the foundation of the Maha movement. To understand and fix this situation, President Trump has launched an all-of-government response in some ways similar to what he was done with Operation Warp Speed, and put Secretary Kennedy in charge of this new initiative called the Maha Commission. Now, the Maha Commission is not perfect. Being an all-of-government response, it integrates all government agencies. Each government agency has their own constituency. The USDA, just like the CDC promotes vaccines in the vaccine industry, the USDA promotes agriculture in the agriculture industry. And so a lot of us justifiably are frustrated that we're not seeing the movement that we want to see on, say, for instance, pesticides. But remember, this is politics, okay? This is sausage making. It's not perfect. It's DC. Get a clue. Again, I like to say, remember, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. It's going to take a while. It's going to do step by step. I'm looking at Toby sitting here scowling and remembering that Code, he stood up and knocked it out of the park at the U.S. Senate the other day. The Presidential Make America Healthy Again Commission was established by executive order on only February of 2025, shortly after Kennedy's confirmation to HHS Secretary. It's a 14-member commission that includes leaders of HHS, USDA, EPA, NIH, FDA, and the other agencies. Bobbie is chair of the commission, but he is not in charge of EPA, FDA, and all of these other agencies. He's in the position of basically facilitating consensus. The mission focuses on addressing the chronic childhood disease epidemic, specifically obesity, diabetes, autism, and mental health disorders, by identifying root causes like poor diet, environmental toxins, over-medicalization, and inactivity. There has never been such a candid and comprehensive response to a public health crisis in the entire history of the United States. Never. I mean, we are living through a historic moment. This is transformational. So far, the Commission has released 2 key reports. The first was essentially a threat assessment. The Make Our Children Healthy Again assessment was published in May of 2025. It's a 72-page analysis identifying a wide range of factors driving the decline in children's health, such as ultra-processed foods. You know, I just heard talk about where we're just focusing on foods. Thank you. I appreciate that you got that part of the message. That's only one part of a very broad initiative and agenda. Ultra-processed foods, chemical exposures, chronic stress, unnecessary medications, all specifically identified. It outlined 10 initial research initiatives and called for federal restructuring. That federal restructuring has hardly begun, and it's being blocked very actively left, right, and center by our good friends in the House and the Senate. The second was an action plan, the second report. September 2025, just barely happened. Make Our Children Healthy Again strategy was published. This is the action plan. It's a comprehensive plan of actions with over 120 initiatives, emphasizing executive actions to promote nutrition, reduce toxins, enhance transparency, and realign incentives. To guide the implementation of these actions, it's proposed to create a new agency with the within US HHS. I know none of us want another federal agency. Currently called the Administration for Healthy America, or AHA, that's the working title. Strategy organizes initiatives into 4 pillars: advancing science, realigning incentives, raising awareness, fostering collaboration. Many aspects of this plan appear quite radical to Europeans and really to many mainstream Americans. Here are the pillars, briefly. In the area of nutrition and food policy, revamp dietary guidelines for Americans to prioritize whole foods, limit ultra-processed items, and ban synthetic dyes. Remove restrictions on whole milk in schools. Encourage states to waive SNAP benefits for sugary drinks and candy. Check, check. Define label ultra-processed foods. Improve military and school meal standards. More fresh produce. Promote low-carb, whole food diets in action in guidelines and education. For the environmental toxins and chemical pillar, phase out petroleum-based synthetic food dyes. Check. In progress. Review GRAs. This is generally regarded as safe status for food additives. We have a huge laundry list of things that have been defined as GRAS that are in our foods that really have never been carefully examined. Assess and reduce pesticide exposure. There it is. Okay? They want to do it via EPA reviews, though these policies have been softened from initial proposals, in part due to lobbying. Remove fluoride from water supplies. Study electromagnetic radiation and heavy metals in soil and water, things we were just talking about. Link soil health to human health through farmer support programs and research. Regenerative farming. When have you ever heard regenerative farming being an agenda item for the U.S. federal government? If that's not transformational, I don't know what is. Regarding physical activity and lifestyle, to establish a presidential fitness test in schools and fund after-school activity programs. Let's get our kids out there moving their bodies. Partner with the President's Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition to combat child inactivity. Integrate nutrition and lifestyle education into medical schools and public awareness campaigns. Boom. Okay? Everybody's been complaining. I know it. Anybody here who's got an MD knows it. When they went through, the amount of nutritional training they got was pretty much zed. Okay, that's going to get changed. Regarding medications and over-medicalization, it's a particular focus. Review over-prescription of SSRIs, antipsychotics, stimulants, and weight loss drugs for children. Ensure most favored nation drug pricing. Ban direct-to-consumer pharma ads. Now, the drug pricing is something that there's another way to look at this, and there's some dissension on that. Some people in the community think that actually we need higher drug prices to discourage people from taking all these drugs all the time. But this is the decision. You know, Trump, people hit me with this all the time. What's this deal with Pfizer? And I don't know what's going on in his brain. I don't know what his strategy is. I don't know whether there's some quid pro quo going on there. But what I do know is he's a business person. He's very focused on trying to bootstrap the economy to the extent that he can, and dropping drug prices is something that he seems to think is an important part of his overall agenda. So that's where that's coming from, I'm pretty sure. For the research, phase out animal testing of drugs and chemicals. If you follow Twitter and the headlines, that's a hot topic right now with Bobbie. He's putting out all kinds of press and actions at FDA and otherwise. Full transparency on vaccine data. Boom. Reconstitute ACIP to eliminate conflicts of interest. Boom. I'm living it. And like I said, they don't like it very much. Regarding the research and transparency pillar, fund $50 million for autism and chronic disease research. Now, frankly, $50 million is a drop in the bucket. $50 million is small change in federal world. I just discouraged Bobbie from dropping $1 billion on some manufacturing facilities for biowarfare countermeasures that we absolutely don't need. Okay, $50 million, I'm sorry, I'd like to see that a little more robust. Eliminate industry influence through ethics frameworks and transparency rules. Hold public hearings and roundtables evaluating federal programs for effectiveness. And the final pillar, institutional reforms. Create this administration for a healthy America to coordinate chronic disease efforts. This AHA is going to pull from, it's going to eliminate like 15 other federal departments that exist right now, bundle them all into a common structure, get it aligned so that we don't have these silos where they're all fighting each other over turf, and get them oriented around promoting health and responding to chronic disease. Specific agenda, fire and replace conflicted CDC and NIH officials and cut $500 million from the mRNA projects. They did that, okay? Align 30-plus states with MAHA policies, prosecute misuse of public health funds. Has there been progress, or are these just words? Under Secretary Kennedy's leadership, HHS has already advanced special nutrition program waivers, dietary reforms, and ACIP reconstitution. And that's against huge headwinds. I mean, I can't tell you the challenges that the Secretary faces on a daily basis and his lead staff. He can't even staff up right now. The vast majority of his appointments are still pending. To date, the strategy emphasizes public sector, public-private partnerships, ergo with farmers and public engagement. However, there's been setbacks. Agriculture lobbies have influenced pesticide language, drawing criticisms from environmental groups and the general public, particularly with folks like us. Broader reforms face budget hurdles and congressional obstructionism. The broader long-term goals include reducing childhood obesity from 20% to under 10% by 2030, cutting chronic disease rates and reorienting the entire medical system from a focus on treating illness to promoting health, thereby saving trillions in healthcare costs through disease prevention. I'm going to take a minute. Okay, I'm going to cut out the whole section that talks about changes at the CDC and ACIP because I only have 3 minutes left. So let me just scan down. Oh, this is a key thing I want to mention. In this reorganization, the State Department is now assuming a greater role in global health policy. Major restructuring of the U.S. government health enterprise is in progress. Together with USAID, the CDC has traditionally led many aspects of U.S. international public health initiatives. Under President Trump, this is now changing. USAID has been decommissioned and the U.S. is withdrawing from the World Health Organization. The State Department will now be playing a much larger role in guiding U.S. international health policy. Under Secretary Rubio, Thomas Donano, acting as Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security, will be assuming an active role in guiding international health security. This comes in the form of a new America First global health strategy based on 3 pillars, making Americans safer, stronger, and more prosperous. I'll just summarize briefly where this is going. The whole idea of working in coordination with large globalist organizations like the WHO, the UN, the World Economic Forum, and a whole swarm of NGOs is going out the door. Just like the policies with trade, whether you agree with them or not, the new logic is bilateral engagement. Okay, that means U.S. to that member state or that member state or that member state, and the goal is not to subsidize and impose on them solutions, but rather to enable and support them developing their own capacity, capabilities, and solutions. We've got to stop being, not only stop being the world's policeman, militarily and otherwise, we have to stop trying to be the world's public health doctor. Okay, we got to let local solutions, again, it comes back to the principle of subsidiarity. We have to, a benign, benevolent United States, which is what we are. I mean, we are good people. We are kind. We're considerate. We want to help advance the health of the world. We also want to protect our own health security, by the way, which seems reasonable. But we don't want to just cut things off. We want to enable local solutions to local problems. We don't need to build infrastructure and vaccines for Ross River virus. Let's let the Aussies develop it because they're the ones that got the problem. Okay, likewise, that applies throughout Africa, et cetera, et cetera. There's these massive changes in CDC policy that I don't have time to review, but the core point there that you can't lose focus on, please, is Donald Trump sees restructuring the childhood vaccine schedule as a fundamental, non-negotiable position. For the likes of Toby, you've never seen this level of support in your entire life, okay? Trump is absolutely committed. I can't tell you the inside stuff, but I can quote what he said in various posts and in the press conference. He wants the birth dose for hepatitis B gone. Okay? He wants to, if we're going to have hepatitis B, he wants to initiate it at onset of puberty. He wants all of these multivalent vaccines split up. He wants the vaccine schedule completely reevaluated. I could say more about what I hear he wants, but I'm embargoed. Okay? But he's got our back. And I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing, working for free, in the constraints of having, this is like the worst of all worlds. I'm a federal government employee who's not paid. Okay? It doesn't get any worse than that, I think. But the reason I'm doing it is because the secretary asked me to, and because I personally feel that if you're asked to serve your country, you should do what you can. It kind of goes back to when I was a wee little tot, and Bobbie's uncle made some statements about not asking what you can do for your country, or what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. And I kind of think that also that infuses the spirit of Brownstone. We're not coming from a place of being, anarchist revolutionaries wanting to tear everything down. We're coming from a position of traditionalism, core values, and wanting to lift things up, wanting to make America better, and wanting to make America healthier. In the end, it's hard to refute or oppose a commitment to making America healthy again, and yet we hear it. And I suspect equally hard to oppose this new grassroots movements to make Europe healthy again. The entire Western world, I go from here, bounce straight to Mar-a-Lago for 3 days, and then straight to Italy, where I testify in the Senate in Rome. The entire world is watching us. They are fascinated by what's happening. They take courage and encouragement from what they're seeing here in the United States. Okay, let's don't get lost in all of this sense of frustration. I totally get it. I mean, I like to say I threw away my youth trying to become a physician, to operate in a discipline that I thought was deeply ethical and committed to serving the greater good. Just like Bobbie and Werner committed their youth to training to operate in what they believed was a legal system with integrity. And I can't tell you how disappointing it is to realize that a lot of the underlying structure and logic that I made this commitment to as a young person, struggling, Jill and I, literally starving at times, trying to get our children fed while meeting the requirements for tuition and everything else, to be able to be a physician and help people. And then to come to this point and realize the whole system is just profoundly corrupted and distorted. And yet still, what do? We have to move forward. For the sake of our children, we can't give up. We have to be strong. We have to be committed to this fight. And we are making progress. It's hard to see from time to time. It's frustrating, the setbacks we're encountering, and yet we're eating the elephant one bite at a time. Have patience. The entire Western world is looking at the American Maha movement for leadership. It's long past time for healthcare to focus on promoting health rather than treating disease. Thank you. I went over 5 minutes. Thank you for your tolerance.